building of plants, factories here on the African continent and in other BRICS countries, where China takes that technology and makes it available. The Chinese business people will get a return on investment. The countries where they invest in will get more jobs and an opportunity to deepen the supply chains. So energy is both about the traditional energy that has powered the 20th century, but it's also about the new power sources of the 21st century.
This time, Mr. Minister, as you have noticed, both sides, China and South Africa, has been focusing on not only infrastructure building, but also industrialization, as the African continent is embracing both from the first industrialization all the way to the fourth industrialization. So how would you expect this expansion and discussions among you and your counterparts, for example, be able to benefit and let African continent to embrace these industrializations at the same time? Now has to go through every historical process.
Yes. So I want to draw first the connection between infrastructure and industrialization. Indeed. Infrastructure lays the basis. You need rail lines, you need power supply and so on. But industrialization creates the market. If you don't have a growing and thriving market, you can't pay for your infrastructure. So you seek always just to have them as donations. We don't want the economic growth of Africa to be constrained because we rely on donations. We want a vibrant African economy that can pay for the infrastructure investment. And for that, you need industrialization. So what we're looking at now is using the mineral base of the African continent together with the technologies of BRICS countries. Those technologies can help to set up battery production plants. CATL from China is the world's biggest battery producer. They make batteries for cars, but also for power grid systems. And we've pointed them to the opportunities to come and set up an operation here on the African continent, build those batteries here too. Yes, of course, build them in China, but also build them in Africa. And so we will develop regional value chains between African countries that would enable all countries to benefit. I met today with the Zambian Minister of Trade, and Zambia has enormous resources of copper. Copper would be used in electric vehicles, they would be used in many different applications, and Zambia also wants to make sure that that copper is processed here on the African continent. So there's a win-win opportunity between China and South Africa, between BRICS and the African continent. And we can, at the moment, China has generated quite significant surpluses that has helped to power the Chinese economy. There's an opportunity for some of that capital surplus to be invested in commercially viable projects here on the African continent, which then gives a dividend flow that goes back to China and strengthens the standard of living of the Chinese people.
Point out, Mr. Minister, the financing is a crucial issue right now. Of course, there's a lot of misconceptions going on in, for example, media reporting about the so-called African debt. So-called African debt, for example, to China. But we understand about 56% of ratio GDP for African nations only for the debt. That's much lower than many of the developed economies. And meanwhile, three quarters of those debts are to international financial institutions rather to other single economies such as China. So how do you see, the misconceptions that people have about the so-called African debt trap, and also the urgent need and right understanding of financing for Africa, including, of course, South Africa?
Yes. Yeah. So I trace the challenge of development and debt to the end of the Second World War. When the Bretton Woods institutions were set up, the World Bank and the IMF, the voices of the Global South was quite weak. And so the shareholding in those institutions and the level of support that the IMF and the World Bank has given African countries has been, first of all, too low, secondly, too expensive, and thirdly, with too many conditions. What Africa needs is productive investment. More than debt, it needs productive investment, where companies invest in a factory that makes profit and that can sell its goods. And so that's the industrialization part. So I don't think we can that it is an appropriate thing to blame a country for the debt challenges. It's an underdevelopment trap that African countries have not emerged from at the end of colonialism. We saw, even though many African countries got political freedom, the economic chains were still there. And we want to break those chains. We want to work very collaboratively with everybody. We want to work with the European Union and the United Kingdom. We want to work with the United States, with China, with India, with Indonesia.
The private sector as well, all the stakeholders.
Exactly. This is about an open world, a world that says when people interact, when they travel, when they exchange ideas, when they study in each other's countries, when they invest, when they eat the kind of products.
Having said that, though, there's another question about the Belt and Road Initiative.
Yes.
This is already 10th anniversary of that, and also it coincides with the 25th anniversary of China and South Africa diplomatic relations. Now, how do you see the depth and the sophistication the BRI has become, and how much of that has been contributed by emerging economies like South Africa and also later the African continent?
So as I see the Belt and Road Initiative, it's really an attempt to build the transport and logistic infrastructure to enable trade, tourism, friendship, investment. And all of those are important. We all need to have connections with each other. In the old days, the Silk Road was a major moment where different parts of the world could trade with each other. Today, it's not only the Eurasian landmass where the original Silk Road was. The world has become more diversified. All parts of the world is now connected. And an initiative like the Belt and Road Initiative can help to connect people. And developing countries can benefit from easier access to markets. We want to get into the Chinese market. We want to sell our manufactured products there. We want to sell, in South Africa we produce, for example, something with red meat. It's a dried red meat. It's called biltong. It is so tasty.
I had that.
You've
tasted that. Very good.
And is it very good?
Yeah, it is. I'm now doing commercials for South Africa.
Well, 1.4 billion Chinese people have not yet been exposed to it. And
see, this is the trade minister we are talking to. Yes, please.
So Belt and Road provides an infrastructure where we can trade with each other, we can travel, we can invest, and that is a good thing.
And finally, before we go, very briefly a question, but I want to ask this question from the very beginning when I saw you, when you were organizing the Business Council meeting, when you were inviting on behalf of your president all the heads of state and the leaders from the emerging economies to speak. I always wonder how we emerging economies can serve as a bridge, and you are a crystallization of that, Mr. Minister. So how do you see we can be each other's bridges?
I think it can happen through both technical cooperation, but also openness to each other, to learn from each other, to contribute to each other's welfare, and to defend the global trading system. When one country is cut out of the global trading system, it damages the entire global trading system. So the bridge, we want to build a bridge with Europe, we want to build a bridge with the United States, we want to build a bridge with China and India. We all need to be bridge builders because we are all human beings. We're one species. Whether my skin is brown or my skin is lighter, it doesn't matter. Underneath the skin, it's one common humanity. And that humanity finds expression when people collaborate with each other. Different cultures, different languages, but one common humanity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minister. I know you have an extremely busy schedule. Thank you for taking your time and sharing your thoughts with our audience in China and beyond. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All the best,
enjoy the
sir.
rest of the time in South Africa.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, sir.